My brother-in-law, the guy who's married to my sister, recently told my wife that he was in love with her, and that set off a whole string of awful truths in our family. Just yesterday, out of nowhere, he reached out to my wife and asked if she could meet him for lunch. He said he had something important to talk about. When Grace told me about it, she looked a little confused but not too worried. "Do you think it's something about Emma?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Maybe they're going through something, and he wants a woman's take." The whole thing felt off to me. He'd never asked to meet her like that before. Sure, he texted her and the rest of us in the family now and then about ordinary stuff, so I brushed it off. We were all pretty close, and helping each other through life's bumps was just how we operated. "Go ahead and see what he wants," I said, trying to shake the weird feeling. She agreed and planned to meet him at a cafe near her office the following day. The next morning, while she was getting dressed for work, she brought it up again. "I still don't get what this is about," she said, her voice carrying a little unease. I tried to calm her down. "It's probably nothing. Just hear him out. If it turns out to be something serious, we'll handle it together." The cafe she went to was the kind of place that's always packed during lunch, which made her feel a bit safer. She showed up a little early and picked a spot by the window so she could see who was coming in. A few minutes later, he walked in, looking more anxious than she'd ever seen him. They made small talk for a bit, chatted about work, the kids, normal stuff. But once their food came, he took a deep breath and jumped straight into what was really on his mind. He started complimenting her, saying how great she looked. At first, she thought he was just being kind, but then he didn't stop. He began telling her how she'd always been the one bright spot in his life, how she stirred feelings in him he'd never felt before. Said he'd fallen for her the moment he saw her. "I've been in love with you since the first day I met you," he said, his voice shaking. "If you were mine, I'd treat you like a queen. I'd give you everything you deserve." She was stunned, just sat there, staring at him in disbelief. This man, Luke, married to Emma and dad to their 2 kids, was laying it all out there like it was some kind of love story. He kept going, making these big promises about how their lives could be if they were together. Said he'd been keeping these feelings locked up for years, watching her from a distance, convinced they were meant to be. She tried to cut in, tried to tell him he was making a big mistake, but he talked right over her like he'd rehearsed every word 100 times. Now, I should say, he always got along well with Grace. Our families saw each other a lot, and he was always the goofy uncle at family cookouts and holiday get-togethers. He'd text my wife fairly often, but it was always about normal stuff, the kids' sports schedules, family plans, nothing inappropriate. He even messaged my mom sometimes. We all just figured he was being friendly. To us, he was a stand-up guy, someone we never imagined crossing a line. So hearing Grace tell me all this, it hit like a ton of bricks. She didn't let him finish. Got up so fast her chair screeched across the floor, and she walked out, hands shaking. She called me right away and told me everything that had just happened. While my wife was still on the phone with me, his messages started rolling in. First came the apologies. He said he didn't mean what he said, that it was just some kind of passing crush, and that he was sorry for making her feel uncomfortable. But honestly, the damage had already been done. She left work early and headed home to talk to me, her phone buzzing nonstop with calls and texts from him. I told her to pick up one of the calls and put it on speaker so I could hear everything for myself. He was crying, begging her not to say anything to my sister. He kept repeating that it was a mistake, that he misunderstood things, claiming he thought she felt the same way. Apparently, during our time together over the weekend, he got it into his head that Grace had been flirting with him. He said there was a moment in the kitchen, just the 2 of them, and he felt some sort of connection. Now, I'll admit, Grace can be pretty direct and a bit sarcastic, and I guess someone could misread that. But this was way out of line. He asked if she'd told me, and I jumped in right then and said yes, I knew everything. He was on speaker, after all. That's when he turned to pleading with me too, begging both of us to keep it quiet. He just kept going, hoping we'd agree to cover it up. The one question I needed answered was whether this had ever happened before. Had he done this with someone else? Had he cheated on Emma in the past? He swore up and down that he hadn't, swearing on his kids' lives that it was only Grace. Said she was the only one he'd ever felt this way about. At that point, I'd had enough. I told him I wasn't doing anything right then, but I'd call him the next day. And that was it. We were left with this ugly mess, unsure how to move forward. My wife wanted to drive over to my sister's place right then and tell her everything. But just thinking about tearing apart Emma's family made me sick to my stomach. I kept imagining what this would do to my nieces, and it made me feel physically ill. Deep down, I knew telling her was the right thing to do, but I couldn't stop thinking about what this would mean for Grace, too. None of this was her fault, but I knew how families work. There'd be blame, even if it was unspoken. Even if Emma didn't end things with him, and they tried to patch things up, I couldn't imagine us all sitting around the same table again like we used to. This whole thing had the power to rip our family apart. As for him, I couldn't care less. He tried to throw a grenade into our lives, and I wasn't about to pretend otherwise. But I did care about everyone else. And then came the update. Turns out, all those folks who told me I shouldn't wait to tell my sister, they were right. A little after midnight, I got a call from my sister. She sounded shaken, like something was really wrong. My heart sank when she told me her husband had come to her in tears, claiming that Grace had tried to start something with him. He twisted the whole thing around, painting her as the one who made the move, trying to put all the blame on her. I could barely process what I was hearing. I didn't waste any time. I told Emma straight up that it wasn't true, and that I'd be over there right away. This kind of thing couldn't be dealt with over a phone call. I hung up and immediately called my parents. I woke them up and quickly explained the situation, keeping it short and to the point. My dad was furious. My mom sounded stunned, but she didn't hesitate. They said they'd head over to Emma's house to stay with the kids. She was going to need all the support she could get. Then I called my younger brother. He answered, groggy and confused at first, but that turned to concern as I explained what was going on. He promised to come to our place to stay with our kids so we wouldn't have to worry about them while we dealt with all this. Just knowing he'd be there helped settle my nerves a bit. Meanwhile, my wife was already getting her things together. She looked pale, completely drained, but she knew we had to face this. We left in a hurry, and even though the drive wasn't long, it felt like it took forever. Neither of us said much. The silence in the car was thick, both of us lost in our thoughts. When we pulled up, the tension was already heavy in the air. Emma was out front with him, standing on the porch, waiting. He looked completely defeated, shoulders slumped, eyes on the ground. He knew we had the proof, the texts, the voicemails, everything that showed exactly what he'd done. I honestly don't know what he thought he'd achieve by calling my sister in the middle of the night and trying to twist the story. Maybe he figured he could get out in front of it, spin things his way before the truth came out. But it was a desperate move, and it didn't work. As we walked up to them, you could feel the tension like a weight in the air. Grace was visibly shaken, her whole body trembling, and her face was tight with a mix of pain and barely contained anger. Without saying a word, she handed her phone to Emma. My sister took it calmly, but I could see the fire in her eyes. As she scrolled through the messages, her expression hardened. Then she played the voicemails, him pouring his heart out, and her clearly shutting him down. Before she could even react, he broke down sobbing. And I mean full-on sobbing. This is a guy who runs into fires for a living without flinching. Seeing him fall apart like that, crying from his gut like he was being ripped open, was surreal. He looked nothing like the strong, fearless man we all knew. Just a broken shell of himself, brought low by his own choices. Emma stood there silently, her face unreadable. She's always been strong, but in that moment, she was unshakable. She let him finish. She didn't interrupt. She just waited. And when he finally stopped crying, still gasping for breath, she said, in a steady, cold voice, "Pack a bag and go. I can't even look at you." He tried to talk, to explain, to beg. She didn't let him. "Stop," she snapped, cutting him off. "There's nothing you can say to fix this." Then she turned her back on him and walked straight to Grace, pulling her into a hug. That moment right there, it said everything. They'd been close since college, and despite everything that had just happened, they were still there for each other. That hug, it was like an anchor in the middle of a storm. I was left standing with him. He was a mess, face red, eyes swollen, barely holding himself together. He looked at me like he was hoping for some kind of forgiveness or maybe even pity, but I didn't have either. He opened his mouth to say something, voice cracking, but I cut him off. "You need to leave," I said firmly. "This is on you. You need to deal with what you've done." He gave a slow nod and turned toward the house to pack his things. Meanwhile, my sister and my wife sat together, speaking quietly, leaning on each other. The rest of the night was a blur, so many conversations, so many things to figure out. We all came together to help Emma figure out her next steps and how to shield the kids from all of this. Eventually, Emma started asking Grace questions, trying to wrap her head around how her husband could believe he had a shot with her. She kept saying there hadn't been any problems in her marriage, that everything seemed fine. By that point, my wife was crying, tears just pouring down as she tried to make sense of it all. "There's nothing you haven't seen," she said through shaky breaths. She handed the phone back to Emma, and together they started going through every single message from the past couple of years. They looked at everything carefully, searching for anything that might have looked inappropriate. But there wasn't anything. Grace was just being herself. She's always been playful, likes to joke and tease. It's just part of who she is. That warmth, that friendliness, it's what makes people feel comfortable around her. Luke has that same sense of humor. They've always joked around with each other, but it was never anything more than innocent. She acts the same way with my mom and my younger brother too. That's just how she connects with people. The only thing she could think of that might have been taken the wrong way happened over the weekend. She started walking through the memory, trying to figure out when things might have taken a wrong turn. They were all at our place that day, and she and Luke both reached for the fridge at the same time. They kind of playfully bumped into each other, laughing about who'd get there first. He let her win and stepped aside, but then reached around her waist to grab a beer, his hand moving slower than it needed to. She admitted that something about the way he did it felt off. Just for a second, it struck her as wrong, but she brushed it aside, not wanting to stir up drama over what might have been nothing. Now, though, she can't help but wonder if her staying quiet made him think there was some kind of signal. Emma listened closely, and you could see her expression change. It softened. She didn't blame Grace. She's known her long enough to understand that her joking nature isn't some kind of invitation. "This isn't your fault," she told her. Grace nodded, but the guilt still weighed heavy on her. Once they'd made it through all the messages, it was obvious there had never been anything mutual, no hints, no games, nothing suggestive. My wife was just being her usual self, and my brother-in-law twisted it into something it never was. The idea that he let his fantasy get this far and hurt so many people in the process was hard to take in, but thankfully, for now, my sister still believed in my wife. Then my sister decided to check his MacBook, just to see if there was anything else he'd been hiding. She was angry now, moving fast, fingers shaking on the keys. After a couple tries, she guessed his password and got in. She took a breath, braced herself, and started digging through his folders. It didn't take long before she found something that made her stomach drop. Hidden inside a bland-looking folder were tons of pictures of Grace. And not just group shots or family moments. These were all focused only on her. Just her. Over and over. She kept clicking through, and her expression shifted from furious to horrified. One folder stood out. A few years ago, the four of us went on a couple's trip to the Bahamas. No kids, just a relaxing getaway. That was one of the rare times my wife felt comfortable enough to wear a bikini. Normally, she's more reserved, but that trip was different. There were at least 100 pictures of her in that swimsuit, every one of them clearly taken without her knowing. Emma's face went white. It was obvious now. He'd been secretly taking photos of her for years. Not just once. Not by accident. This was deliberate. Obsessive. It made your skin crawl. The realization that he'd been lurking in the background of family gatherings, watching and collecting images like this, was more than disturbing. It was sick. "Is this restraining order territory?" she whispered, barely loud enough to hear. What had already felt twisted now felt truly dangerous. This had gone from inappropriate to something far darker. She called us over to show us the photos. Grace gasped, covering her mouth in shock. She had absolutely no idea, never even suspected this kind of obsession. Emma, her rage now buried under a layer of numb betrayal, started talking through what needed to happen next. She mentioned legal options, safety measures for her kids, a possible restraining order. It was all on the table now. None of us could wrap our heads around it. The man we thought we knew, the one we trusted as family, had been hiding something deeply wrong. This wasn't some silly crush or bad judgment call. It was calculated, creepy, and dangerous. But the chaos didn't end there. Later that night, my sister agreed to sit down and hear his side one more time. She wanted the full truth, no excuses, and she insisted Grace be present during the conversation, so there wouldn't be any spin or manipulation. They set up a FaceTime call, and I stayed off camera, listening close, my stomach tied in knots. Emma recorded the whole thing. She wasn't taking any chances. The moment the screen lit up, you could feel the heaviness in the room. Luke looked like he hadn't slept, eyes swollen, face worn down. He started slowly, hesitating, voice shaky, but little by little, the truth spilled out. And then he admitted it. He'd been obsessed with my wife for years. It started the day I first saw her, he said, barely above a whisper. He explained how it happened during one of those early get-togethers, back when Emma, excited about her new boyfriend, brought him around to meet everyone. At that point, Grace and I were just dating. He met her before he ever met me. At first, he claimed it felt harmless, just physical attraction, a small crush he figured would pass. But the more time he spent around her, the more it grew into something else. He became fixated, not just on how she looked, but on her laugh, her warmth, the way she connected with everyone around her. He described moments where he'd catch himself just watching her, completely absorbed, even when she was just being herself, goofing around or making someone smile. He said he kept trying to push the feelings down, telling himself they didn't mean anything. But the obsession kept growing. Eventually, he started showing up more, offering to help at family gatherings, always finding reasons to reach out with casual texts about nothing important. He said it was slow, and he didn't even realize how far it had gone until he found himself confessing, totally convinced she might feel the same way. Emma sat there and listened. Her face didn't change much, but the look in her eyes said everything. Pure heartbreak mixed with barely controlled fury. She let him keep talking, didn't interrupt. Let him dig himself in deeper. Grace, on the other hand, looked like she'd been punched in the stomach. The fact that this had been going on for years, that he'd been hiding this for so long, it was almost too much for her to take. Once he stopped talking, the silence in the room felt like a weight pressing down on us. Then my sister finally spoke. Her voice was steady, but cold. "What made you think my wife would ever leave me for you?" she asked, locking eyes with him. He stuttered, trying to explain. Said he thought there was mutual attraction. Brought up moments he'd twisted in his head into signs she might feel the same. That's when the dam broke. Both my sister and my wife exploded, shouting, cussing. All the anger and betrayal they'd been holding back came out all at once. It was chaos, raw emotion everywhere. Grace was shaking, her face pale, and eventually she hung up the call, overwhelmed. She turned to me right away, her voice trembling. "It was all one-sided," she said, her eyes filled with panic. "I swear, I never encouraged this." "I know," I told her gently, trying to calm her down. "I always knew. Even if she had once thought he was good-looking, that would have meant nothing. She's not the kind of person who acts on something like that." From the start, she made her views on loyalty and trust crystal clear. I remember one morning early in our relationship, I was watching her get dressed, just admiring her, and she gave me a playful smile and asked if I liked what I saw. But then, just like that, her mood shifted. Her voice turned ice cold. "Don't ever screw this up," she said, "or you'll never see this again." And she meant it. For her, trust is everything. Once it's broken, there's no going back. That memory stayed with me. Sitting there, still trying to process what had just happened, I couldn't stop thinking about Luke. I always thought he was a bit full of himself, had that cocky way of walking, like he owned every room he entered. But man, I never imagined he actually believed he could pull something like this off. The level of delusion it must have taken was unbelievable. Later on, after things settled down a bit, I had a calm talk with Emma. The shock had started to wear off by then, and we could actually speak without shouting. She was clear-headed and unwavering. Her priority now was protecting her kids from the fallout of their father's behavior. She told me that first thing Monday, she'd be calling a lawyer to figure out what legal options she had to limit his time with the children. She was determined to shield them from as much of this disaster as possible. "As far as I'm concerned, he's not living in the same reality as the rest of us," she said, her voice flat and firm. Saving the marriage wasn't even a thought anymore. It was all about giving her kids some kind of stability amid the chaos. Still, he came back home yesterday, not because my sister welcomed him, but because legally, she can't stop him yet. For now, he's allowed to be there, even though it's the last place anyone wants him. The house feels tense and heavy, like everyone's just holding their breath. It's obvious their relationship is over, and I think he finally understands that. There's this emptiness in his face, like he knows any chance at patching things up is long gone. The attorney told Emma that with all the evidence, his texts, those voicemails, the creepy photo stash, she's got a strong case for full custody. Everything points to him being unstable and obsessive. What's strange is, he doesn't even seem like he wants to fight her on it. It's like he knows he's lost everything and doesn't have the strength to push back. And honestly, Emma's going to be okay. She's tough. Stronger than most would guess. Whatever love she once had for him is long gone. She walks through the house now with this steady determination, completely focused on her kids and the life she's rebuilding. You can tell she's not falling apart, she's moving forward. The kids haven't been told the full story yet, but they're starting to sense something's wrong. They always do. They don't know the details, just that something in their home has changed. Truth is, their dad was rarely around when they were home anyway. He was always pulling long shifts at the firehouse, crashing there half the week. That kind of absence had already become normal for them. Still, this is going to be tough for them. The idea of both parents under one roof, even if it was strained, brought a kind of comfort. Now that's all about to change. My sister is ready for it, though. She's already spoken to a child therapist to help them work through the confusion and pain that's bound to follow. She knows she's stepping into both roles now, mom and dad, but she's prepared to give them every ounce of love and strength they'll need. Meanwhile, my brother-in-law's just there, stuck in the guest room, barely speaking, drifting around like a ghost in a house that clearly doesn't want him anymore. He looks like a shell of himself, going through the motions without any fight left in him. It's honestly pathetic, but I can't bring myself to feel too sorry for him. Some friends have suggested maybe he's had other women, that this kind of obsessive behavior wouldn't be limited to just one person. But from everything we've seen, it really has been only about Grace. That obsession's singular, intense, left no space for anyone else. After everything was exposed, my wife blocked his number. She didn't want any more contact and needed to put space between her and his disturbing fixation. But that same night, after crawling back into the house, he made a new email account and sent her a message. It started off like an apology. At first glance, it looked like he was trying to be sincere. But it didn't stay that way for long. He said he never got to finish what he started during their lunch, like there was something more he still had to get off his chest. Then the message spiraled into pages of rambling. He wrote about all the things he adored about her, every little thing that had fueled his obsession. He poured out how desperate he felt, how overwhelmed he'd become by emotions he couldn't control. He listed everything he admired, her smile, the way she talked to people, the way she carried herself. It was disturbing to see it all laid out like that, his delusion so blatant. And again, he brought up the idea that there was some mutual connection between them. Claimed there'd always been a strong sexual tension, like it was something obvious and undeniable. But he was imagining it all, twisting her friendly, light-hearted nature into something it never was. He made it sound like there was some kind of deep connection between them, but honestly, it only ever existed in his imagination. He built this fantasy in his head and convinced himself it was real. Toward the end of the email, things took another turn. He started talking about me. Let's just say, I had no idea he thought so little of me. He went on about how he was sure I couldn't possibly be keeping Grace happy. He criticized everything from how I looked to how I carried myself, basically trying to make it sound like I wasn't good enough for her. It was clear he wanted to chip away at my confidence and plant doubts. Reading those words was like getting punched in the gut. His obsession with my wife had completely warped how he saw everything, including me. I wasn't just her husband in his eyes. I was an obstacle, someone he thought didn't deserve her. But instead of making me feel threatened, it only made me more determined to protect Grace and our life from this madness. We sent that email straight to Emma and her attorney. It was more proof of just how unwell he'd become. Between the weird obsession, the twisted declarations, and now this insulting rant, it was starting to look like enough for them to push for him to be removed from the house for good. Right now, we're just taking it one step at a time. Having the support of our friends and family has meant everything. It's helped us stay grounded through all this craziness. My wife's still not herself, but she's doing a little better each day. She admits she feels guilty, says she let her guard down too much around Luke. Usually, she's very clear about boundaries with other guys, but with him, she let her guard down. He was family, after all. She never expected anything like this. And for what it's worth, Grace is beautiful. She gets attention from men all the time. But she felt safe around him because he was supposed to be someone she could trust. Thank God, her relationship with Emma hasn't been damaged by this. There's no bitterness between them, which honestly brings a lot of relief. We're all going to be okay. It's just going to take time. Through this whole mess, my biggest concern has been for my sister and her kids. What my Luke did will have lasting effects on them. Our job now is to make sure they're safe and emotionally supported. Kids need to feel secure, especially in situations like this where everything they've known starts to fall apart. That's why we didn't wait around. We acted quickly, gathered proof, faced it head-on, and brought in legal help. Waiting or brushing it off could have led to something worse. So what are your thoughts on this story? I'd love to hear your take in the comments below.